Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, and North Carolina. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Boy, what unbelievable chaos we have amongst the Atlantic Coast Conference. Teams losing, the Virginia Tech Hokies doing a heck of a lot of winning, and they are tied with Louisville's for second place in the ACC. Big one coming up on Saturday between the Cards and the Hokies. Winner has sole possession of second place and controls their own destiny. But it all started on Thursday night with a 38-10 win over Syracuse for Virginia Tech. We're going to unpack all that and so much more. It's coming up on episode 324 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. Well, Hokies fans, we record on Monday, October 30th, 2023 from our Tech Sideline studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead, leave us a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And to go ahead and refer the podcast to a friend as well. It certainly helps us out. Let's introduce the football crew is back on set. To my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, senior staff writer Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, our managing editor David Cunningham. Producing behind the scenes, Mr. Nick Brown. And I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. The Tech Sideline podcast is also brought to you by Coldwell Banker Townside Realtors, trusted real estate services for the Roanoke and New River Valleys of Virginia. If you're in the market to purchase or sell a residential property, or if you're looking for land or investment property in Southwest Virginia, we have you covered. With 3 offices around the area, visit cbtownside.com to learn more. All right, fellas, let's talk some football here. What an unbelievable turn of events. We talked about the chaos in the ACC. How fun is this? This is fantastic. Who would have thought?
Certainly not after a 1-3 start, right? You don't think you would end up at this point. It's not surprising that there's ACC chaos. You can't call it coastal chaos anymore because there's no coastal. But it's interesting. Was it 3 teams with with one loss? Is that it?
Just 2.
Just 2.
Oh, Louisville and Virginia Tech, the only 2 left with one loss.
Well, that makes it. Just imagine like if Virginia Tech had beaten Rutgers. Or not Rutgers per se, but let's say they won 2 of those games, which they certainly could have. They certainly could have beaten Purdue. They certainly could have beaten Marshall. They'd be 6-2 going in there against a Louisville team that's ranked. I mean, you might have 2 ranked teams. This would be a huge game in the ACC from a national perspective. It's still a huge game for the ACC. It just doesn't seem as big because Virginia Tech has that 4-4 next to their record.
It is very strange when we're talking about a team and we're still questioning whether they can make a bowl game, but they're playing for sole possession of second place in the conference this week. So just one of those bizarre seasons. I think Northwestern had one of those weird seasons a while ago where they were like 0-4 in non-conference and then they came back and they won a terrible Big Ten West. But this is one conference. This is just regular, no division play here. So that makes it even stranger.
It's like the NCAA tournament in basketball when you see like the 16 seed up there every year with like a 17-15 record or something like that, but they won their conference tournament, so they're in the NCAA tournament. It's kind of what it's like.
Or like, what was that year? Georgia Tech went on some kind of run. No, it's Georgia went on some kind of run to get to the tournament. They were like sub 500 or something.
That was when they had to move the SEC tournament because a tornado touched down and it took out the Georgia Dome or something. So they moved it to Georgia Tech's arena. And
when we're talking about that, it's a weird season if it's that what it is. But I mean, that was a dominant win the other night.
There's so many what ifs, right? When you talk about, I feel like we're going to get to the end and we're going to talk about a million different what ifs. Like, what if Ollie Jennings doesn't get hurt? You talk about, okay, what if you started Kyron from day one? Or what if, they made the switch in the offensive scheme just a week or 2 earlier. And, I feel like that's something that at the end of the year, we're going to unpack no matter what takes place. But I want to first get your guys' immediate thoughts on the win on Thursday.
I thought it was big. I think it was important. That's 3 home wins in a row by a significant margin. This one was a little bit different because it was complete domination from start to finish. I mean, it was 30-3 at halftime. The Pitt game Tech was in control, but there were still lingering doubts in the third quarter when Pitt scored touchdowns on basically back-to-back plays. And, even the Wake Forest game was a 7-point game in the fourth quarter. So you always felt like Tech was in control of those games, but if something fluky had happened, then those results could have been different. This one was just thorough domination from start to finish, which I think that's another step in the evolution of a program. They showed they could beat a couple of bad teams. Now they showed they could thoroughly dominate a bad team. And I think the next step is, there are two next steps for me: winning on the road and beating a good team. They could theoretically take care of both of those steps this weekend against Louisville if they can manage to win that game. But they haven't. They've turned a corner, I think. And there's still a few more corners to turn, but I think this is the type of progress that we were hoping to see before the season started. And I think we thought maybe I thought I had Tech going 3-1, and then the schedule toughening up, and kind of things leveling out after that. Instead, it's going the direct opposite.
Yeah, when you have a matchup in the history of the series that was 62-0, it can't be the most lopsided result in the series. But this is up there behind that. I mean, this was pure domination in this game. They gave up 0 rushing yards in this game. The same defense, they gave up 80-yard touchdown runs, to Florida State and all these huge plays. 0 rushing yards for an entire game. Offensively, finished with 528 yards. 5 field goals. Tucker Holloway contributing on special teams. What they finished with? 8 sacks.
8 sacks, correct.
I think it was all by the defensive line in that game. I mean, everything was clicking, hitting on all cylinders in this game. You were kind of waiting for it. And the weird thing was, it could have been worse. I mean, they kicked 4 field goals after getting in the red zone. This really could have been a worse outcome. It was closer than the game actually was. And that's the remarkable part about it is, just how far this team has come, where, a couple of weeks ago we're talking about, what changes do they need to make to the coaching staff at the end of the season. Now it seems laughable in hindsight because they've sort of turned this thing around. And, I'm with Chris. They still have beaten, let's see here, 3 of the 4 bottom teams in the ACC.
2-12 combined.
So I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer in my column on last Thursday, which somebody on the message boards picked out one line in the 20th graph, like, way to be negative all the time in this thing. It's like, it's the 20th graph, settle down. Like, we can put a little disclaimer on this that far down in a story, but that's the thing you want to see is, can they put this together? Can they take it on the road? Can they beat a more quality opponent?
I was going to save that talk for later, but I kind of want to dive into it now since you brought it up, Andy. 5 field goals. It feels like next week you're going to need some of those to be touchdowns, and I feel like this isn't the first time we've said that either. I'd take you all the way back to the ODU game when we said, kind of stalled out in the red zone, could have used some touchdowns there. Just seems like if you're going to beat Louisville and even some of the, you don't want to say tougher ACC teams, but like you mentioned, we played 3 of the worst teams in the conference with these wins. You're going to need to turn those into 6.
Well, for one thing, Syracuse was pretty good at red zone defense. We talked about that going into the game.
8th nationally, I believe.
They give up a lot of yards, and they gave up a lot of yards on Thursday. They don't give up a lot of points inside the red zone like that. So they are a tough team to score on inside the 20 there. I will say, you can look at that as a negative. You can look at it as a positive, because you convert some of those opportunities. It feels like this team is not quite playing to its full potential. Even with how well it played on Thursday, you go, man, there's still more out there for them to do. So, I guess you can kind of look at it both ways. We're like, man, they're not scoring in the red zone. But you go, hey, if you can convert some of those opportunities, then this thing's really rolling and doing even better.
That's definitely true. I mean, anytime you win the time of possession battle, 41-42 to 18-18.
TOP.
You convert 8 of 16 third downs. The other team is 0 of 9. You outgain them 528 to 137. Like, you actually expect a bigger margin of victory than 28 points.
Yeah, they quadrupled them up in yardage, basically.
Right. I bet the stats to the 1999 game aren't any more lopsided than this, except for the score. That game was like, it was like 2 defensive touchdowns and a special teams touchdown. Just a lot of crazy things happening, towards the end of the game. But this had that type of feel at halftime. I think that game was 31-0 at halftime, and this was 30-3. Things didn't descend as much in the second half for Syracuse as they did back in 1999, but it was the same type of game. And so I think it was good for the fan base to experience 3 consecutive home games where there's a really good atmosphere and where Virginia Tech comes out and, puts up over 400 yards of offense, or 500 yards in this case, and scores over 30 points and wins the game with relative ease. I think one of the issues that I've had for a long time, and this dates back to the end of the Beamer era. I remember writing an article maybe around 2014 or 2015 when Virginia Tech at that time was actually winning more games on the road than they were at home. Like, anytime you came to Lane Stadium and you weren't playing like a FCS team or a non-Power 5 team, it seemed like Tech was losing. And then they'd go on the road and like upset like Duke, who was in the top 25 that year, but then you'd lose to Boston College at home and things like that.
That overtime game against Maryland.
Exactly.
Like that.
You were doing that at home, and it was just like so much of this fan base comes from Northern Virginia, Richmond, the 757. I mean, these are long trips, and it costs a lot of money to be a Tech fan because of the 2-night minimum for hotels and things like that. I mean, these fans spend thousands and thousands of dollars to be season ticket holders every year, and I hated it for them that Tech wasn't winning at home for quite a while there. And so this is what has been sorely needed. And I think it's a shot in the arm for the fan base, certainly for the whole fan base, but particularly for the portion of the fan base that attends games regularly.
And you mentioned before, there was no like moments of worry in this one. I mean, normally you're like, oh gosh, here you go again. And it's a 3-hour stomach ache, however you want to describe all those games over the years. I mean, it's been like, I think I looked it up, 2019 against Georgia Tech was the last time there was this lopsided of a game at halftime. And that was a road game, and that was an awful Georgia Tech team that they played. Even some of the games that kind of got out of hand in recent years, I know a couple during that COVID season at home, even at halftime, it wasn't like it was a lopsided score.
Even ODU this year.
Yeah, quite like this one was. So, I mean, from start to finish, this was just a party out there for Hokies fans. It had to have been fun in the crowd for people that were watching this.
Yeah, I can say that the crowd was certainly rowdy, although I will say, Andy, you were right on, and we'll get into our buy-seller hold results later on. Sellout did not quite happen. I would say maybe wanted to get your guys' opinion. Like, the least hyped up Enter Sandman, they kind of skipped one of the songs. I think the people dropping in, I don't know if there was any form of a delay, but they skipped one of Before God's Gonna Cut You Down. They play The Outsiders. They cut that one, and it was just like kind of, it almost felt like Sandman was like, whoa, boom, okay, we're already doing Sandman. That was quick.
Well, ESPN must have been caught off guard because they were like talking with Dan Mullen about his pregame thoughts. It's like, don't you want to show the intro? Isn't that the purpose of coming here for a Thursday night game, is to show that? But it was a little bit sparse crowd up in the corners, not a completely full group there, but we expected that. We've talked about how hard it is for a lot of people that are not in Blacksburg to get here for a game like this.
And I think I know Tech fans have a history with Thursday night games, or people are obsessed with the word Thursday. But if you're going to have a weeknight game, a Friday night game is better for the fan base.
Oh, no doubt, because your work week has concluded at that point.
Correct.
Well, I would argue this, guys, and I wanted to bring this up to you. I was talking with another student journalist, Raza, last night, and he brought up a great point. Virginia Tech has played arguably one poor quarter of football in their last 4 games here, and it would be the first quarter against Florida State where they gave up 22 unanswered points. They've won or tied every quarter except 3 of the 4 against Florida State, and then they actually lost the third quarter 7-5 against Syracuse. Other than that, they've won or tied every single quarter they've played in the last 4 games.
7-5. Good game. Good baseball game. But,
it's been quite a turnaround. There was one really bad quarter at Florida State, but you look at how they're performing relative to the line in some of these games. We see the line this week. It's Louisville by 9.5 now. I think it's come down a little bit from where it opened up. Virginia Tech has significantly outperformed the line. Pitt, I think Tech was a 3-point underdog. They won by 23. Wake Forest, 1-point favorite. They won by 20. Syracuse, 2.5-point favorite. They won by 28. I feel like some of these computer models and some of these betting markets haven't quite caught up to where Virginia Tech has turned things around, because it's factoring a lot of that early season stuff. So I see this 9.5-point line. I go, I know Louisville's a pretty good team. You look at offense, defense, they're really well-rounded, complete team. They're playing at home. I still look at that line and I see that number and I go, man, Virginia Tech's playing better than what I thought that line would be.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Louisville, besides Florida State, is certainly by far the most complete team that Tech will have faced so far. You look at the Syracuse team, they scored 10 points against Virginia Tech. Well, that just happens to be the second most amount of points they've scored in a game in their last 4, with their highest being 14. Wake can't score. Pitt can't score. So Tech is playing well, but Tech is either giving up 250 yards a game on the ground or absolutely nothing. There's nothing normal. The teams with good running games that they face, they've gotten gashed.
Except Syracuse. That was supposed to be their attack.
Syracuse doesn't have a good running game. They racked that up against Western Michigan and Colgate or whoever.
I think they had capable runners, though.
I think they have capable runners, but it's a bad offense. I think Wake Forest has capable running backs. They just chose not to use them. And Tech schemed them into throwing it more rather than giving it to their running backs. But it's just the offenses as a whole that Tech has faced. When they faced bad offenses, they've totally shut them down. When they faced more competent offenses, they've gotten gashed. So there's no in between. And I think Tech has made progress defensively. I know they have. But how much progress, we don't know. I think Louisville is going to let us know exactly how much progress Tech has made on that side of the ball.
Yeah, this will be a put up or shut up type game. I mean, we're either going to find out that Virginia Tech is actually a threat to make the ACC title game in this one, or they lose, and then we're back to the borderline of, are they even going to make a bowl game?
What is the scenario if Tech does end up losing to Louisville? What needs to happen for them to still have a route to the ACC championship game? Because you're going to need help in that case scenario, and obviously you got to win the last 3.
You'd have to win out and hope Louisville lost twice.
You would, and then it gets into a mess of, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 teams with 2 losses in the ACC right now.
Right.
You can't figure out that tiebreaker at this point. I mean, Louisville plays Virginia and then Miami after this.
Right.
So you'd have to hope for them to lose, to drop into that, then hope you get into some sort of mess of it'd be very rough.
Virginia is playing different level right now.
You would need
it's true, but I mean, it's still. You don't want to have to go into a 7-way tiebreaker or whatever it could possibly be with 2. It wouldn't be that at the end of the day.
It would be that gift from The Hangover of all the numbers.
Right, exactly. But I mean, you'd have a head-to-head loss with Louisville, which certainly wouldn't help.
And then Nick brought up an interesting situation. What is it if you do beat Louisville, but then you drop a dud, say at BC against NC State or against Virginia? There's an easier route there.
It's an easier route. You have the tiebreaker over Louisville. But then again, if it becomes a multi-team tiebreaker, then you're talking mini divisions, I guess, and things like that.
Yeah, well, they do it where they have record within that little 3-way tie, and then they eliminate a team, and then it can go to head-to-head. So they'd still have a nice win against Louisville. And if it comes down to they have to, how do they do it? You have to go down the standings and who has the best win in that or something like that. It's complicated. So
2 weeks ago, you tried to bring this conversation up, and I shut you down immediately. I'll let you have your 2 minutes this week.
All right.
Speed Louisville, and then we'll have an in-depth discussion about it. I promise.
I mean, it's not even a possibility if they lose to Louisville. But if they beat Louisville, it's there.
It's there.
That's the amazing part of this whole thing. It's not complicated. It's just win out and you would get in. I mean, right now it's win out and you get in, but they have to win on the road against a ranked team, which I think is a very tall task and something they've not proven they can do yet.
They've won 1 road game in the Brent Pry era, and that was at Liberty, right?
11-point dogs in that game.
That's right. Oh, wow. Wow, bigger underdogs at Liberty than they are against.
That's improvement as a program.
Yeah. Last time they won an ACC game on the road as this big of an underdog was Miami 2019, 14-point underdog.
Wow.
Hendon Hooker's first start. They won by 7.
Right.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and take care of business on Saturday. Let's give David some love. Got anything for us in the 4th chair, Decona?
I do. Too many stats to count from Saturday. I dedicated a whole section of my notebook after the game to a bunch of different stats because there were so many amazing stats. That's what happens when you have 8 sacks in a game and 15 in the last 2 games. But John Love kicked 5 field goals. He became the first kicker since Joey Slide did it in 2016 and the 4th in program history to make 6 in a game. To make 5 in a game. 2 guys made 6 in a game. Tootin had a 100-yard game, his 2nd of the year. Tech allowed no rushing yards, fewest allowed since Florida State had minus 15 on a Thursday night in 2012. Somehow that was a loss.
EJ Manuel. That's how that was a loss.
It was just the fourth time since 1987 Tech did not allow an opponent to convert a third down. Syracuse was 0 for 9, and 7 of those third downs were of 8+ yards. That's the first time since Duke of 2013. The Hokies scored 30 points in the first half for the first time since the 2020 season opener against NC State. Andy already mentioned largest halftime lead since 2019 Georgia Tech. The defense is on pace for 45 sacks this season, which would be the third most in the ACC era, the most since 2014. That team had 48. Tech's 30 sacks are tied with the 2020 team for the most through 8 games since joining the ACC in 2004. Tech finished with 318 more rushing yards than Syracuse. That's the 8th largest rushing margin in a game since 1985, the largest since September 2009 versus Marshall, which was also 318. It's one of 4 games on that list where the Hokies held their opponent below 0 rushing yards on the ground. Tech has played 3 games since 1987 where it had 8+ sacks and allowed 0 or fewer rushing yards. I'm sure you remember this game, Chris. Pitt 1999, 2002 Rutgers, and then Thursday night against Syracuse. Those are the 3 games where Virginia Tech had 8 or more sacks and did not allow a rushing yard.
Wow.
It's the first time Virginia Tech has won 3 consecutive ACC home games since 2019. That was the 6 overtime game against Carolina, and then the Wake Forest game and the Pitt game, which of course were Bud Foster's second to last game and last game. The last time Virginia Tech had 2 safeties in a season was Justin Fuente's first year in 2016. Obviously, Tech had one on Saturday or on Thursday with Syracuse. It's the first time Tech recorded 12+ tackles for loss in 2 straight games since 2000. 12 versus Temple, 12 versus West Virginia in back-to-back weeks. And the Hokies, I just looked this up. As of Thursday, the Hokies were one of only 4 teams to allow opponents to convert on every single trip to the red zone. That's a negative stat. I just looked it up earlier. Virginia Tech is the only team in the country, 133, with a defensively with a 100 percentage, meaning every single time an opponent gets in the red zone, it converts.
God, can't miss a field goal at some point in there. Come on.
Now, I will say on the other side, you guys were talking about the red zone woes for the Hokies to start. Tech is 46th in red zone conversions, 87%, 29 times in the red zone, 15 touchdowns, 14 field goals. You know, it's balanced, but obviously, you know, when like Tech got in the red zone, Tech kicked four red zone field goals
out of 6 trips. Yep.
Yeah,
you'd like it to be 4 touchdowns and 2 field goals
on Thursday.
Yeah.
I don't exactly have any. I have one specific Syracuse question, and then we can get to some other questions later. Why do you think Tech ran so many trick plays against Syracuse?
I think they're adding a little bit to the offense each week, and I think it's just something to put on film. So it's something for defensive coordinators to have to worry about, to have to coach their team to prepare for. To say, look, they're willing to throw the ball with was it Jalen Lane who attempted it first, and
Lane
then
ate the first one. He threw it away.
That's right, and then Malachi Thomas later. Malachi is not a surprise. Malachi was a really good pitcher in high school, so Malachi's got a good arm. So like, and now that in hindsight, I'm kind of wondering why they'd never broken that out before. But maybe it was something about Syracuse that they thought they could have more success. But the main thing, I think, is you're just gradually adding to your repertoire each week. Try to make each new defensive coordinator give him something extra to think about each and every week. And, by the end of the year, you've got a lot of stuff piled up that is difficult to prepare for. I mean, Tech's offense has gone from being, in my opinion, one of the easiest to read running games in the whole country, and this turned on a dime. It's now one of the toughest to read. That long run by Drones the other night, the entire Syracuse defense just started running out to the right. Bob Schick pulled, and there was nobody there. He ran 30 yards down the field and never touched anyone. That's how messed up the Syracuse defense was. That's how confused they were, and which obviously makes it a lot easier for your offensive line to block They didn't even really have to block, and the play still went for 40 yards. So I just think Tech's offense has become so difficult to prepare for. It's so difficult for they're messing up defenders' key reads quite a bit. So everything, when you have an offense like that, that means everything that the other team coaches throughout the week defensively is wrong. Here's the key you're reading. You're reading the first step of the offensive guard or something like that if you're a linebacker, and then you do certain things to you go the opposite grain is what the Tech offense has been doing now for 4 games in a row. And it's the offense that I wanted, and I think they should have been running the whole time. But better late than never. But I just think they're adding to that every week, and the more they add to it, the more successful they're going to be. But with the caveat of it's going to be a much, much more difficult challenge at Louisville.
Yeah, I think you look at that Malachi Thomas play. I mean, that was just they pitched it to him, and like it's a running play out to the right. Now all of a sudden the safety has to think, do I come up and try to make a tackle on this, or is this guy going to pull up and throw it? So maybe that gives them the slightest bit of hesitation, and all of a sudden there's not as many guys descending on the run the next time they run that pitch play. So, yeah, it all goes together. I mean, it helps as kind of like in the framework of what normal plays look like.
I think that the pitch play is really interesting this year. You've seen it's an option play. I don't know, this one in particular probably wasn't an option play, and it was a slightly different kind of pitch, but in general the pitch looks like it's been an option for Tech this year, and sometimes Jerome's keeps it, sometimes he pitches it to the running back. I think sometimes he's even decided to throw it. So that pitch play for Virginia Tech, it's not the base of the offense per se, but it's something that they've added a little bit to each week, and it's been a difficult play for opposing defenses to stop, and I think that's going to continue to be successful for the Hokies. But again, now that's something you have to worry about. If you do force the pitch, maybe Malachi Thomas throws it.
What'd you think of first play of the game, offensively taking a shot like that, and then continuing to go back to it, ended up hooking up eventually?
I'm fine with it. I think you have to stretch the defenses horizontally and vertically to be a complete offense, and that does require taking shots sometimes, even if it's not there, even if it's incomplete. Those are low percentage plays, but how many yards does that lead to later? Because they know you do have the capability of making those plays, and Tech later on they did hit a deep ball for a touchdown. Earlier this year they hit a deep ball for a touchdown against Pittsburgh. So they've shown they did have that capability. That play should have been a touchdown because there is a wide open receiver running across. Which receiver was that?
I think it was Gus now.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was Quan on the first one.
The first one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, whichever one it was wide open, and he threw it to the guy who was double covered. So there's one of your... well, actually, this wasn't a red zone trip, so I guess that doesn't matter. It ended up being a 43-yard field goal.
So Andy's probably right, because the one that he just overthrew, even though he was double covered, Quan had like 2 steps on him.
Yeah.
And then it went over his head.
Just went over his head.
So he almost had him.
But the other was a walk-in.
Right.
Yeah. The other was like Danny Cole running across the field against Florida State, and there's just nobody within 20 yards of him. Yeah.
Those are the good kind of plays to run. I mean, eventually you will see those and hit on those.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
It was the James Franklin a couple of weeks ago where the guy asked him the question about, do you just sometimes just chuck it deep? And he's like, it makes my skin crawl. He would even like suggest that. Then they went out and just had like check down city against Ohio State. So maybe just chuck it deep. I know that's not the offense that Virginia Tech's running. There's actually, thought behind it.
There's method to their madness.
Hey, throw it deep and somebody's down there. But sometimes you got to just take some of those shots, and they have taken those shots.
I thought Tech did a really good job though of mixing it up, and we talk about that pitch play. It's funny, Chris. I edited Brandon Patterson's story on I guess on Thursday ahead of the game, and he was talking about stuff Tech could do. And I think I told Andy about this early in the game. Tech ran a couple of those pitch plays. That's the same play that Florida State had run against Syracuse, and Tech had run it at times this season. But Florida State ran it against Syracuse and found a lot of success, and Brandon broke that down. So kudos to him. And then we saw Tech run it a lot. And I think what came with that, and I think Drones was a little bit too energized because he overthrew the first couple plays, and he got banged up on that one early in the game. He took a little bit of a shot, I think, when he slid. And then it looked like he was getting checked out on the sideline. It looked like he was it was his shoulder, but he came back in, and then they go long on the first pass, and he overthrew him by like 10 yards. And I think he was just a little too energized, a little too much adrenaline going. But I thought Tech did a good job of taking advantage of that. And I think Tech mixed it up very, very well. Like using different inside zone, outside zone, the pitch, like a lot of motion. Like there were so many times during the game where Syracuse linebackers and safeties were just like, what is going on? And I think it's when I think back to that Marshall game, Virginia Tech was when Marshall knows what you're going to do, that's a problem. And Tech averaged, over 6 yards per carry in that game, but only ran it 30 times and got away from the run. And I think the steady improvement we've seen to now, it's like, man, this Virginia Tech team is hard to prepare for. And that's not something we said in the first few weeks of the season. Even against Florida State, Tech was okay offensively, but I think the last few weeks Tech's really ramped it up in terms of throwing in, a little bit of misdirection here. And I think Kyron Drones has added to that. Now, we got a question, and we can bring it up now. We got a question about Grant Wells. Is this the last we see of Grant Wells, and how well would Grant Wells perform in this offense? Is this performing well strictly because of the Drones thing? And I want to open it up to everybody else, but I think Drones' running ability and his ability to make defenses key in on the run, on the option, kind of is just icing on the cake in terms of this scheme and what Tech wants to do.
I think this is an offense that they should have been running from the very beginning, whether Drones was here or not. I think the last offense that they ran had no chance of success, and I've said that many times. It was just too easy to read, too easy to draw a bead on. I mean, I'm not repeating anything that Brent Pry never said himself. And it shouldn't have taken them this long to change, because in 2019, when they made that change, it took them 1 week. It shouldn't have taken them 10 months or 9 months or whatever it was to pivot. Before Tech played Marshall, I actually went back and watched a couple of games of Marshall to watch their running back play, and Drones and Wells was their quarterback when in the games I was watching. So it was from 2 years ago, and Marshall's offense had a lot of moving parts to it, and it was pretty similar to Tech's running style now. Quarterback didn't carry it as much, but I mean, Drones only carried it 8 times the other night, and 2 of those were sacks. So yes, I mean, Tech could have been doing quite a bit of what they're doing right now before. Because when you go back and watch the Marshall tape, when Wells was their quarterback, that offense was just a lot more varied than the one Tech was running the first 15 games. And they kept trying to run the same offense basically in Drones' first two starts, and it didn't work. They're averaging like 5 yards per pass attempt. Like there was no chance to succeed in that offense. And then I'm on record saying it. I thought it was that bad. But it's like night and day now, the types of plays that they're running, and the variety and the willingness to pull offensive linemen in the opposite direction of the play. They've run some unbalanced line to success. They did that against Wake Forest. It's just a much more difficult offense to prepare for. So yes, you've seen the last of Grant Wells at quarterback, but they could have been running maybe about 2/3 to 75% of what they're doing right now. That could have already been incorporated before. And I think if they had done it, I think if they had run this offense from day one, if this is what they had stalled from spring, I think Drones would have had a much better chance of winning the job from day one. I'll put it that way. And I think they'd be 6-2 right now if they had run this offense from the very beginning. But better late than never. But yeah, look, Drones is the guy now. This offense is suited for him. It's ideal for him. He's got 2 years left after this. And in fact, every player on offense has at least 1 year of eligibility remaining. So I think it's exciting times for the Virginia Tech offense right now. And I think they change things on a dime, which is not something you see very often in college football, when you're able to pull off a scheme change like that in the middle of the season. We saw it in 2019 with that staff. We saw it in basketball with Buzz Williams 1 year when he changed his entire defensive philosophy in the middle of the season. But It's not something that is common in college athletics. Normally, for football, you need a spring practice to pull something like that off.
Yeah, I think Wells could have succeeded throwing the ball like Drones has in this offense, but I think you can't understate or overstate, I should say, that just how much of a threat and a dimension to the offense that Drones brings with his legs. And it's, even if he doesn't keep it a bunch, 8 times or whatever it was in this game, the threat of it is enough that it sort of lords over everything you do defensively. Because if that guy gets loose, he's going to go for a big play. He has that capability. So you're always thinking about him. Is he going to keep on this one? And he's got the throwing ability. I mean, that was the question coming in. Can he throw it as well as Wells? I think he's shown he can, and he has. So, if you have the same kind of thrower you had before, but you have the runner on top of it, then, obviously there's no choice to be made, and Drones is really humming right now.
I think there's no doubt that you have your quarterback of the future. Since I've been in school here, which would be first game was that Carolina game to start the 2021 season. This is by far the best quarterback play that I've seen here.
No, I want to say this. I was really critical of Drones after his first 2 starts. I didn't think he played very well. Just like everybody else was really critical of Wells when his 13 starts, when he didn't play very well. I was more critical than I should have been of Drones after those 2 starts, just like everybody else was more critical of Wells than after those 13 starts. We've seen how good the offense is after the offensive switch happens. Like, people wouldn't have been as critical of Wells if they'd been running this offense the whole time. And I shouldn't have been as critical of Drones as I was. And when he threw so many interceptions, when we got the chance to watch it in practice, I should have known it was because he just wasn't suited for that offense. It was like, round peg, square hole type thing. But I think everything's aligned now. And that's the good news. I wish it had gotten aligned earlier, but everything's aligned now. So I think I'm not saying Tech's going to win out or anything like that, but I think you can look forward to a few. You can see everything working now. It's like it's all downhill from here, so to speak.
Safe to say Kyron Drones hopefully and should be, if all goes well, Kyron Drones should be taking snaps until late November of 2025.
Yeah. I think so.
Happen.
Now, knock on wood, I mean, every year we sit here and say, I just want to have the same starting quarterback for 2 years in a row. So I'm saying it again. I'm going to go ahead and start that conversation.
Do you think
Please let that happen.
Well, I mean, sign of that happening?
The only way that doesn't happen is if there's an injury. That's the only way that doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, go back. How long was Gerard Evans supposed to be the quarterback here?
Right.
Went pro early. How long was Josh Jackson supposed to be the quarterback here? Got hurt. How long was Hendon Hooker supposed to be the quarterback here? The COVID season happened, distrust with the staff, everything that went down with that. So stuff happens in college football. So if you're talking about 2025, like, my goodness, that is a long, I mean, we don't even know if the ACC will exist in 2025. I mean,
Sure.
So much can happen in college football in that short amount of time. I say just enjoy it for now. Hope that he comes back next year and continues along the way there. And 2025 would be gravy at this point.
I will say this as far as like player retention. Remember after 2016, Gerard went to the NFL even when it looked like he wasn't going to be drafted. Bucky Hodges declared when he knew he was going to be a late round pick, and Isaiah Ford declared even though everybody knew he was going to be 6th or 7th round. These days with NIL, you get these guys, these borderline guys, 6 figures.
Stick around.
Might stick around for an extra year.
David, you had something for us?
Yeah, I think when I think back to the spring, Kyron Drones gets brought in from Baylor. And when we had our discussions, I think we all knew it was a close battle, but from everything we saw in practice, Wells was the guy because of the way Virginia Tech wanted to play. And I think people, whether it was people on the message board saying, well, why isn't it Drones? Drones can run the ball. People got sick of Wells, whatever. People questioned it, and people were like, well, why would Wells be the guy? And to Wells' credit, I think we saw what he can do in that very first game against Old Dominion. He threw the ball very well.
And the second quarter against Purdue.
Yeah, before he got hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of dealing there in that second quarter.
And I think in week 3 and week 4, you saw what Kyron Drones, like we've seen 3 different pieces of the Virginia Tech offense this year. We saw Virginia Tech under Grant Wells in the first 2 games. We saw Virginia Tech under Kyron Drones in the old offense in the third and fourth games. And we've seen Kyron Drones in the new offense. And by far the best product is obviously Kyron Drones in this new offense. But I think when you think about those first 4 games, what we had seen in the spring was 3 and 4.
Yeah.
We saw 3 and 4 in practice. We saw 3 and 4 when Kyron Drones threw a couple picks in that practice, and Grant Wells didn't. I don't think Drones was necessarily comfortable in that. And I think you saw that a little bit against Rutgers, against Marshall. Not that Drones played bad, and obviously once he got some actual reps under his belt, he played pretty well. But I think this offense suits him that much better. And it's just kind of funny how at the beginning of the year it was, well, Wells is going to be the guy because this is how Tech wants to play, and it's better suited for him. And then Wells got hurt, and I think as a result, Tech had to adapt. And when Tech figured out stuff wasn't working and Tech adapted to something that Pride probably wanted to do all along, which is this offense. And it just so happens it's better suited for Drone's skill set, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah. Okay. So I went back and read an article that I wrote last December, a couple of weeks ago. And it's interesting because my original prediction from last December was that Drones would be the starting quarterback. And I wrote that because in the article, as I said, the fact that they went out and signed Drones and the fact that they late flipped Pop Watson shows that they're pivoting to a new style of offense. And I think that's the style of offense that they're about to change to, and therefore they're going to be running this system in the spring, and it's going to favor Drones, and he's going to be the starting quarterback because they're switching to this specific style. I think I even called it in the article like the Hendon Hooker offense or something like that, which is kind of what we're getting. It's pretty similar to the Hooker offense. Not quite as much misdirection in the passing game, but other than that, pretty similar. So that's what I wrote in December of last year. Fast forward to the spring, and they go out there and they're running the exact same offense they had been before, and it's like, this doesn't make it. Why are you going out and signing these mobile quarterbacks and then still running the old style offense? And Drone struggled in that offense in practice. He did. I mean, we were all there and saw it, and they stuck with that offense until they just couldn't stick with it anymore. And but at any rate, it's been a real interesting evolution, I'll say, ever since December. You've got 2 quarterbacks who I think in the right situation can be successful. And finally, I think they're being put in a position by their coaching staff to be successful. And you see how the offense is taking off.
Chris, I got a question I want to piggyback off that for you. But first, I got to tell our viewers, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Check out their new Checking with Perks account. It comes with cell phone protection, roadside assistance, fuel savings, deals and discounts, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more about this great new account for students. Chris, you were just talking about that. I want to ask, okay, so why? Why did they stick with it for so long? Was it some form of loyalty to Grant Wells? Was it?
I think they're trying to. You want to make it you want to have a competition, a legit competition, but at the same time, you also know your returning starter has a lot more experience, and he knows the system that you've already got. So I think they were hesitant to change too much, but I also think they were. I never had an issue with like the schematic concepts of the passing game. I think the main issues in the passing game is it was always 3rd and 9 because Tech couldn't run the ball. My main issues is the running game itself, and it was so unimaginative. And you know they could have done things to help that before. I don't know why it took them so long, and I don't. Like I said, I mean, it shouldn't have taken that long. You can pivot a lot faster than that. They pivoted in 2019 in 1 week, right?
Well,
But I don't want to keep hammering on that. So
sometimes it just takes time.
It does.
I mean, Kyron had played, what, like 1/2 in his career before that? He gets here in January, he goes through spring practice. I mean, he was a young quarterback. Sometimes it just takes time for these guys to for it to make sense, and regardless of what system they're in. So, obviously that opportunity got pushed to the forefront when Wells got hurt. But, the quarterback he was in early September, I think, is drastically different than what he was in April, regardless of the offense.
There was a play in the spring game where it was a regular 10-yard out. And I'm sure if you were at the spring game, you remember it, where he threw it like into the dirt, like 7 yards short of the receiver. and his technique was so bad on that play. And from his throwing motion to his footwork and everything, and you watch that play and you're like, I don't know how this is going to work. He's made so many strides since then. I think his technique has gotten better. So you have to give quarterback coaching a lot of credit here as well.
And he's the offensive coordinator.
Well, I'm talking about Brian Christ.
Oh.
Because remember, we had, I won't say who, we had somebody on the team in here in the office for an interview earlier this year, and he was basically like, yeah, Chris does a lot of technique work with the quarterbacks. Even those guys technically can't coach, right? But yeah, so I think whoever deserves credit for it. I think they've made tremendous strides with Drones as far as his technical ability as quarterback since the spring as well.
Well, guy that we have failed to mention yet at this point, we've talked all about the defense, but how about APR, Antwaun Powell-Ryland? He's 4th in the country with 9 sacks on the season. How impressed were you guys with the D-line as a whole? 8 sacks. Last week, the week before, they had 7 sacks, 15 in 2 games. That's good stuff.
I wrote on Friday, now this was before the weekend's games, but if Tech hadn't recorded a single sack the first 6 weeks of the season, they still would have been ranked 67th in the country in sacks after Thursday's game. That's how many sacks they got in the last 2 games. It's insane. APR, obviously a great addition. He's going to be the first guy in double-digit sacks since Darryl Tapp. You also have to take it with a grain of salt because Wake Forest is 125th in sacks allowed and Syracuse is 120th. I mean, these are 2 teams that cannot protect the quarterback at all. So you
got to play who's in front of you.
Correct. You know? You're exactly right. And either way, Tech is obviously much improved there. APR's got 9, but it's evenly spread out after that. So it's a group effort after that. And overall, it is better. I mean, they do have their stud pass rusher that they wanted, but I think across the board as a team, they're a little bit better at it this year too.
I think what was impressive, 9 different guys got in on part of a sack last week. I mean, that's spread out pretty well on the team. I know APR gets the headlines, but I thought that was a relentless group across the front. It wasn't just him that was getting after the quarterback. So, I mean, that's really what it boils down to on the defensive line.
Elijah Clark getting after the
Elijah
quarterback.
Clark getting there. He got a sack, and I'm like,
James Jeanette got in there in the end.
He got that one. I'm like, is that somebody that just got the number wrong, or says I've never heard of him before? So, congrats to him on the half sack there at the end. But I mean, you can have like a fearsome pass rusher, but if nobody else is getting after the passer, you can put 2 guys on him. You can chip him with the tight end. You could double team him on the edge, and you're not going to get hurt on the other side. If you do that with this line, the other guys are capable enough of getting there. It's a group effort, and then I think that's helping APR get to the quarterback as well because they can't just focus on him solely coming off the edge. So impressive job they've done with that group. I know J.C. Price was a message board punching bag for a while there with some of the results that he's gotten, but you got to hand it to him this year. They're really getting after the quarterback.
A lot of those sacks were meet me at the quarterback sacks, where it was if the first guy hadn't gotten the sack, the other guy would have. I mean, case in point on the safety was Powell-Ryland and
Cole Nelson.
Cole Nelson. Yeah, on the safety. So it was like an old school Tech pass rush where it was not just like one guy back there getting like a solo sack by himself. It was multiple guys. Exactly.
Yeah, those are always fun to watch. Well, let's fly through this buy or sell here from last week a little bit. Andy continued to be pretty solid, I will say. Will struggled just a little bit. And again, I don't want to take a crazy amount of time on this considering David and Chris did not partake a week ago, but certainly worth going through. I felt proud of the lines. I thought the lines were really good, and then some things went and blew up, like Tech going for 318 yards on the ground and Syracuse having 0 rushing yards. Who would have seen that coming? But
I mean, either way, you owe me money is what we're getting to here, right? You're putting your own money behind these lines.
I saw your tweet, and other people tweeted as well. Are we counting this Malachi Thomas touchdown as a?
Wouldn't have cashed. I cashed at the books.
I put it as a no because your tweet was right. You said it wouldn't have done an anytime touchdown score.
That's
would
right.
Not have counted. So
we'll be specific with your wording on these.
Yes, absolutely. We'll start at the top. Lane Stadium sells out. You and Will both sold. It did not sell out, so that put you guys at 1-0 on the week. A good start. Virginia Tech scores 30 or more points. Will sold that. Andy sold it as well. Tech did score 30 or more points. points. So you guys were wrong on that. Virginia Tech gives up less than 24 points. Andy bought it. Will bought it. And they did give up less than 24 points. Virginia Tech has 5 plays of 20 or more yards. Will bought it. Andy bought it, and they had exactly 5 plays of 20
right on
or
the
more.
number?
It was right on the number.
Wow.
So the line was good. The line was good. Virginia Tech has 3 or more sacks. You guys both bought it. Well, they had 8. So
They had that in like the first 15 minutes. Yeah, they were all over.
first play of the game was a sack.
Right. It was a very good start to that number.
No doubt. Tech gets an interception. Andy, you sold it. Will bought it. They did not get a pick. And this is where you and Will started to separate yourselves a little bit. Kyron Drones goes turnover free. You guys both sold it. He did not have a turnover.
He was begging for one, though. He threw
did
one.
throw it
We
right
say
to the
that
gut.
every
Yeah.
week.
No, there was one that he threw in the red zone that the
Yeah.
guy jumped the route and he just dropped it.
Yeah. But did he fumble this week? I don't. This
That
is the
could have
first game he
been.
didn't
That
fumble.
could have
right?
gone the other way.
Yeah, I don't think that he fumbled. He did break Sean Glennon's streak of most consecutive passes without an interception.
How about that?
That stat was approaching at halftime, and I tweeted, and people were like, "Nice jinx, way to go!" I'm like, "It's 30-3.
I think it's gonna be okay.
Like it's all right." So for the rest of the half, every time he completed a pass, I'm like,
almost-
"He's now 2 passes away."
I
from
almost
tying
like
the
wish he
record.
had thrown one in the second half. Just like get it out of your system.
If he had thrown it after I started mentioning it every time he completed a pass, I would have been like, all right, I own that, that jinx. But as it turned out, he did not throw the interception. Also, pretty funny, Sean Glennon read that and is like, I had no idea until now that I still had that record. So
That's funny.
he enjoyed it for like 30 minutes and then he gave the record away.
I will say this was the first game that he did not put the ball on the ground, though. There was no misexchange on a handoff. Tootin did not fumble. Drones did not fumble. That was a positive
It's a
takeaway.
very clean game in that regard.
Yes, and here's a stat for you. Bishol Tootin, 18 carries, 0 lost yards. Thomas, 13 carries, 0 lost yards. Duke, 4 carries, 0 lost yards. Chance Black, 3 carries, 0 lost yards.
From where they were in that Pitt game, where I think Pitt had like 11 tackles for loss or something like that game. I mean, that's a credit to the backs, but also the offensive line. I mean, we haven't talked too much about the offensive line and the strides they've made. I just don't think it's an overwhelming group, but
It's not.
you don't rush for that kind of yardage without your offensive line clearing some holes. There were some huge holes in that game.
Oh, yeah.
And, these running backs aren't being met in the backfield as often, and certainly not at all in this Syracuse game.
Syracuse throws the ball 25 or more times. Andy sold it. Will sold it. And you guys were correct. They threw the ball 18 times.
They only had 40-some plays. I mean, they were not on the field very often.
Zero third down conversions. They did
Based
a lot
on the
of punting.
score, the over probably should have hit on that.
They ran
just didn't have
43
enough plays.
43 plays, and 8 of them were sacks.
They punted so
They
much
tried
we
to throw
hurt
it.
their punters.
All right. So what was it? 25? Is that what
It
you
was
said?
at 25 the line.
Okay. So they only attempted 18 passes. They
But
tried to
throw
attempt 26. So because
Okay.
the 8 sacks.
Yeah, because
Right. Right. So you have to start thinking about those things.
That's true.
But
They didn't throw it. How you should probably phrase it from now on is there will be
Dropbacks?
25 dropbacks.
Okay.
Yeah.
there's so many RPOs. And
Yeah,
stuff
there
to
are.
tell who's going to
Yes,
throw
it can be hard
The
to tell.
bottom line is that's a winning ticket that I have.
Fair enough. That is, you guys are helping me to continue to think a little bit deeper, so I appreciate it. Schrader has 13 or more carries. Will bought it. Andy bought it. He did not. He carried the ball 11 times.
Close.
It was close.
11 carries and 8 of them were sacks.
Yeah, that was one of the oddest things to me. Now, I know the game got out of hand pretty quickly, so that you're going to call more passing plays then. I thought Syracuse would come out first drive, run. Based on their strengths and weaknesses in offense. I mean, how many yards did Schrader have rushing against Tech 2 years ago in Lane Stadium? A lot.
It was like 170. It was
ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
He ran all over them. And he's a good running quarterback. And they just come out. I thought they came out pass happy, which I thought was interesting considering the strengths and weakness, their own strengths and weaknesses, and also their own strengths and weaknesses of the opposition. But again, I think this is going to be Dino Baber's last year for the 4th year in a row.
Well, yeah, we get that is the buzz up there in central New York. Virginia Tech throws 26 or more times, so I'm curious to look at the dropbacks on this. But Tech throws the ball 26 or more times. Andy bought it. Will bought it. They did not. They threw it 24 times.
Two running back passes.
Not true. 2 running back passes.
I think you guys got me there. And I thought I even looked at that because there is one point where
Drones had 24 and
16 of 26 as a team.
Drones had 24 and Thomas and Lane each had 1.
You guys got me there.
Gio trying to cheat us out of our money here.
So,
pay that man his
we need to
money.
upgrade Vegas over here.
I will say the line was good then, though. I put 26.
Yeah, that was a good job.
But
You've lost 2 of these on technicalities because of receiver and running back passes, and it wasn't any.
But technically,
touchdown.
Tech tried to throw it 28 times because Drones was sacked twice too.
That's right.
So
so now I have to update.
it would have been
the
right either
scoreboard.
way.
There we go. Kyron Drones, 60 or more rushing yards. Andy bought it. Will bought it. He did not. He had 56 net rushing yards. He gained 65 yards, but he only had 56 net rushing yards.
That was one of those where
that's
probably
still good.
didn't need to.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
eight rushes is pretty low.
I'm going to take
number.
credit on the line again there.
He's going to be fresh going into Louisville because bye week, and then you only have 8 carries the next week. And 2 of those were like sacks where he got like drugged down. They weren't like hard hits. So he's going to be really fresh going into Louisville.
Kyron Drones, 4 or more total touchdowns. Andy sold it. Will sold it. And you guys were correct. He actually had 1 total touchdown on the ball game. Jalen Lane, 60 or more receiving yards and a touchdown. A little bit of a player prop there, tag team. Andy sold it. Will bought it. It did not hit. He did have 72 yards receiving, but he did not score a touchdown.
Those
in this game.
those combos with the touchdown, that's where it always gets you.
You didn't like it because of that. Yeah,
That's right.
And he scores a lot of touchdowns.
Can we talk about my favorite play of the game?
Let's
my
do
favorite
it.
play. Yeah,
Please,
it was
please.
the throwback. It was when Drones rolled right, and then he threw back across to Lane, who ran a deep slant. Yeah, that's a tough play to defend when you catch them in single coverage like that with no safety help. Yeah, he turned that guy inside out, and Drones has the arm strength to throw it back across the field on a deep ball, and that's if you have a quarterback who can throw it that far, and a slot guy like Lane who is not easy to defend, then that's a tough play for a defensive coordinator.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost looked like that's not how it was supposed to play out. Where Drones rolled here, it looked like it was going to be kind of a hitch route, and Lane like almost had diagnosed that it wasn't going to be there, and then because he started breaking towards the sideline, then broke back out the other way, and Drones hooked up with him.
It was a corner post.
Gotcha.
That was the design. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Now, I mean, he had other options on the play, but that's the option you want to take when you see single coverage out there like that.
It was a pretty ball. It was nice. That was a fun one to watch, no doubt about it. Let's see. Bayshul Tootin, 15 or more carries. Andy bought it. Will sold it. He did have 15 or more. He had 18 for 118 yards and a touchdown. Quite a day for Bayshul Tootin.
And a long of only 15. So it was a very consistent day.
Pure dominance.
Yeah.
Again, asserting the will the entire game. Malachi Thomas touchdown. Andy sold it. Will sold it. Technically, no, but he did pass for a touchdown, which was not on anybody's bingo card.
Technically correct is the best kind of correct. Because it means you win.
You have to. You're gonna have to start setting these up. Malachi Thomas involved in a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought
for a touchdown?
It counts for a touchdown.
Yes. Who would have thought that Malachi Thomas was a threat to throw a touchdown? I mean, I knew we had a baseball background, but I don't think any of us would have sat up here and said, I think Malachi Thomas has a
I
chance
think he's
to
got to
throw.
throw a touchdown today.
Syracuse certainly didn't see it coming.
No.
No, not at all. Virginia Tech, 230 or more yards through the air. Andy bought it. Will bought it. Didn't hit. 210 yards through the air. Virginia Tech, 150 or more rushing yards. Andy sold it. Will sold it. They blew it out of the water. They had 318.
Doubled it up.
Yeah.
318.
Very, very impressive. Syracuse under 175 rushing yards. Will sold it. Andy sold it. And they had 0 rushing yards, which is crazy.
Wait, we sold them being under 175 or we bought it?
You guys, according to this, you guys both sold them being under.
Really? We thought they would go over.
You thought they would go
175.
over 175.
For some reason, I thought they'd be under that number, but
I don't think I would have typed it wrong, but I could have. Maybe we'll have to fact check.
don't shortchange me on this. Or maybe I'm just trying to go back and go, no, I wasn't 175 yards off of my prediction of that.
Right. Virginia Tech wins. Andy bought it. Will bought it. The Hokies won. If they win big, or excuse me, not if they win big. If they win, are they bowling? You guys both said yes. Now, obviously, we're going to have to see your thoughts now. Does this look like a team that'll win 6 games?
you feel a lot better about it. Regardless of what happens this weekend. Boston College, I know they've looked feisty lately. Their quarterback got hurt last week, so I don't know really what his status is going to be going forward. NC State actually looked good last week, beating Clemson, but that's not a team that week to week you feel has the consistency. Plus, you get him in Lane Stadium.
203 yards of offense for NC State in that game.
Yeah. Well, they had a pick
horrible.
6 in that game. Tells you where Clemson is.
You're right. Clemson's not good.
4-4 is
I think
crazy.
Virginia Tech is better than Clemson right now.
I would love to see him play. They won't, but it would be cool.
And at the end, you get Virginia, which has looked a lot better, a lot more competitive in these last couple weeks. So I don't say that one's a gimme on the road or anything like that. But I'm thinking, odds makers, Tech's still probably favored in those 3 games. Maybe one of the road games is tighter than I think, or the NC State. But I would feel good about them winning 2 of those 3 down the stretch, regardless of what happens this weekend.
I think they will beat NC State at home. NC State, they changed quarterbacks. Hasn't helped. The offense is broken. It's just not a good offense down there. They don't have much skill position talent.
Unless they're playing Marshall.
Which weirdest game ever, because those 2 teams, that never should have happened against each other. But I don't see. I think NC State's defense is good, but I think Tech will win that game at home. It's going to come down to winning one of those road games, and Tech has won one road game in the Brent Pry era. So, like I said, that's one of the next steps. That's one of the next corners to be turned. They've turned the corner of blowing out bad teams at home, and now they got to show at some point that they can win on the road. I think they'll win at least one of those road games. I would like to win one of the next 2 because I don't want to leave it at 4 and 6.
No, that's bad when you have to.
Yeah,
outs at that point.
Exactly. And they have done that before, but that's not something that you want to. You don't want to have to take that one to the bank. So hopefully they can pull one out either this week or at Boston College. I was worried about the Boston College game before the season started because it's at Chestnut Hill. This is not a 3-9 Boston College team like I think most of us assumed.
BC is 1 win away from bowl eligibility and play Syracuse this weekend.
They might be 6-3 in that game. So you can't even say it's like a bad Boston College team anymore. I mean, Tech struggles up there against bad BC teams, much less mediocre ones. They got a mobile quarterback. We'll cross the BC bridge when we get there. But as far as the overall scheme of things, that one looks like a more difficult game now than it did at the very beginning. And I already always thought it would be difficult.
BC, 3-point dog this week at Syracuse.
It's hard for me to favor Syracuse. It's hard for me to favor Syracuse.
That's one of those. What does Vegas knows?
Yeah.
Because you're like, it doesn't make sense.
It might come back to the Castellanos injury.
Yeah,
probably.
Even still,
he did come back into the game, but
even still, when a team that's been outscored 150-34 in the last 4 games is favored by 3 points, even at home, you have to go, what am I not seeing here?
Yeah.
The thing too is like everyone was like, "Oh, is Tech gonna struggle against the best running quarterback?" Obviously, they didn't struggle against Garrett Schrader at all. Well, Castellanos is a completely different style runner. He's not this big tight end body. Like he's incredibly elusive and fast.
And it never came down to the quarterback run against Syracuse because it was a blowout early on. Syracuse, they didn't try much of it early to begin with. And who knows, if the game had been close over 4 quarters, maybe you lean on it, but it's 33 at halftime. You're done with the quarterback runs at that point. BC, I mean, this guy will come out and he'll carry it 20 times if he's healthy. I mean, look what he did to Florida State. I mean, he ran all over them, which is pretty incredible to think about. But it's a heavy part of their offense is him running the football. So makes sense that he's a little bit banged up right now.
It felt like, 1 second, David, and then let's go to you, David. What you got?
Well,
first?
I was going to say, Chris, you talk about it never felt like Syracuse that never was a thing. That's because Virginia Tech got to Schrader on the first play of the game.
Yeah, it's 3rd and 28 on the first drive of the game.
That's what I mean.
It's
like Syracuse, like I said earlier, Syracuse, 7 of Syracuse's 9 third downs were 3rd and 8 or more. And then the other 2 were between 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 7.
So they never had a 3rd and short.
No.
Yeah.
So Virginia Tech backed Syracuse up into these situations where even if I think you look at that first drive of the game, Schrader's sacked and there's an intentional grounding penalty. It's 2nd and 21. 7-yard rush, there's a holding penalty. So it's 2nd and 28, then it's 3rd and 28, then it's 4th and 21, they punt. That is a successful drive from Virginia Tech. Syracuse 2 penalties helped. But even, Syracuse had a penalty on the next drive. The first drive, the third drive of the game for Syracuse, that Syracuse did not have a penalty. It was 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 6. Syracuse didn't even try to run Schrader. And at that point, it was 10-0.
You can still do it at that point.
And you could still do it at that point. But Schrader didn't really run the ball. Like, I don't know why. They tried to run Allen, and he was okay. He finished with 42 yards, and he picked up a couple here or there. He had a long of 14, but the longest run Schrader had was 7 yards.
And I think that was on the draw when it was 3rd and 28 on the first drive of the game.
And so I think Tech did, and maybe it was just something that Tech did defensively, but I thought the Hokies' defensive front, I mean, Andy talked about it, 8 sacks, all from the defensive line. When you bottle it up like that, and you put Syracuse in, if they have 9 third downs and 7 of them are passing situations, that's tough. And that means they either got stopped on 1st and 2nd down, were sacked, there was a tackle for loss, incompletions, like something happened. And that's a credit to Tech's defense.
I thought coming out of a bye week for both teams, Syracuse was egregiously out game planned by Tech, which was awesome.
No question. No question. I think Tech is Tech's defensive staff manipulated Wake Forest offense into doing what they wanted to do. I thought they were easily able to outcoach Pitt. Not that Pitt does a lot schematically, offensively, but yeah, I think the Tech coaching staff is getting the better of the opponents that they're facing right now. They'll have a huge task on their hand this week, and we'll get into this more on Wednesday, of course. But we know Louisville is well coached, based on what Brom did at Purdue. It's so hard to win at Purdue, and he's gone into Louisville and won at a higher rate than his predecessor in his first year. So. There'll be a different challenge this week, but I certainly feel a lot better about the situation than I did a month ago at this time.
Let's get everybody's final thoughts before we wrap up the show today. Andy?
Massive win. I mean, it was a blowout win, something they haven't had here in a long time. We talked about the bye week or open week. They haven't won coming off an open week, played like that in a while. It's just refreshing. It feels like for the longest time with this program, we're talking about when are they going to turn a corner? When are they going to turn a corner? It feels like they're turning that corner. And you still have to see more. But, I mean, how refreshing is it to have a win like that? No really worries throughout the game. You're looking at bowl projections. You're seeing Virginia Tech in bowl projections. Like, that's exciting for a fan base to be able to open that up and read that and dream of the possibilities of where they could go at the end of the year. And that's even before you talk about this, scenario that could play out with the ACC title game. I mean, crazier things have happened in the ACC. So don't want to get too far ahead of yourselves on that, because I think Louisville is a very tough opponent coming up. But I mean, from where this program was a month ago, this is just night and day.
I know it says 4-4 next to Virginia Tech's name. So you've got top 25 Louisville versus 4-4 Virginia Tech. But like, this is a Tech team that, if the changes that were made had been made earlier, I think would be a 6-2 Tech team, and I think everybody would be looking at this game a lot differently than they are. So it's a big one. Like I said, we'll find out exactly how much Tech has improved when they play this game this weekend. I'll also add that to further add to the excitement of the Boston College game, it is a noon game on the ACC network.
Oh, lovely.
Exciting, noon on Chestnut Hill.
Glorious. It's perfect.
And you could be back in Blacksburg by midnight.
You'll be having clam chowder for lunch, and you'll be getting clam chowder for dinner.
On the town in Boston.
I will be enjoying Boston.
Perfect.
Yeah,
there we go.
The subway will still be open when I'm leaving the
there you go.
Stadium at night, so it'll be perfect.
Gio, I think the biggest thing is kind of what Andy said. I think us included, we all had a lot of doubts, and rightfully so. After those first 4 games, Virginia Tech was 1-3. This was not a good football team. There was talent there. The signs were there. But when you keep a quarterback in the game that's injured for too long, or don't run the ball when you're averaging over 6 yards per carry.
Couldn't stop the run.
You can't, and yeah, well, that when you can't stop the run consistently, like it was. It looked like felt like Tech was taking like a step forward and then 3 steps back every single game. And then that Pitt game rolls around. And Tech, granted, bad Pitt team, but Tech came out and just played the way it should. And credit to Chris Marv, who has cleaned up the rushing defense. Again, big test this weekend. Louisville ran for over 280 yards, I think, this past weekend.
Yeah, they're good.
Now, it's been give or take. Against NC State, Louisville only ran for 20. So there are some positives and negatives there. But Tyler Bowen, I mean, this offense is playing to a quarterback's strength. And a couple weeks ago, we weren't saying that. We were talking about, is there a chance that Virginia Tech has new coordinators at the end of the season? Because the signs were not there. The signs are there now, and that's credit to them, credit to everybody involved. This Virginia Tech team is in a good place. I think the ACC championship game stuff is a little far-fetched, but it's a possibility. We'll find out more this weekend. But I think the biggest thing is that this Virginia Tech team is on track to go to a bowl game, and that is a solid. If Tech makes it there, that is a solid success in year 2. After a 3-win year 1. Getting to at least 6 wins would be a positive, and then you build on that and go from there. Like Chris said, every single player on offense is eligible to come back. Like there are a lot of positives going forward, and if the offense looks like this with everybody back next year, you get potentially Nolly Jennings back. I think the hope is there, and Tech as you wrote, I believe, Chris, turning a corner. Tech turned a corner over the last couple games. This middle 4-game stretch, I think looking at it before the season, I'm not sure if, I think we all thought it kind of defined the season because you had Pitt and Florida State, and I think we thought Pitt was going to be better. Then you had Wake Forest and Syracuse, but it kind of defined the season in the way that Virginia Tech went from being maybe one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country to showing maybe some of the best signs of promise of any of the Power 5 teams in the country.
Trust the process, right? After 4 games, I did not trust the process, and now I trust the process again. I think that kind of sums it up for me.
It almost makes you think, too, like, what are we going to be talking about next season?
Yeah, right.
Hokies football has a pretty bright outlook, and I can't wait to continue to chat about it with you fellas. What's coming up on Tech Sideline this week? Of course, we'll be back here on Thursday as well.
Jason Stam sent in a couple articles that I didn't have a chance to post at the end of last week. I'll post those today. Other than that, a normal week. Is it normal media week available?
Yeah, should be.
Okay.
But we got plenty of basketball stuff.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Basketball season
stuff starts next
soon.
week.
We talking hoops next week? We have to.
We probably
We
need
have to
talk
at some
hoops
point.
Thursday?
this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we need to talk off the air because originally Will wanted to do a basketball preview podcast last week, so we need to get a basketball preview podcast in at some point.
Okay,
So,
okay, we'll talk off the air.
So
Beautiful.
there's
First game's Monday, right?
Yeah.
So there's-
sounds like we might be doing 2 more pods this week, maybe.
well, we'll
on the
see.
table.
So there's plenty of basketball content to go around. If you didn't see it, we had Kenny Brooks on the podcast on Friday. He was fantastic. And shout out to Carter Hill and Jack Brizendine. They were down in Charlotte with me.
They killed it.
Last week. Yeah, Carter Hill got Kelly Gramlich from the ACC Network on, Joel Berry from the ACC Network on to talk with, along with Kayla King and Melijah Poteet. And he had a 13-minute interview-ish with Seth Greenberg, which I thought was really cool. They talked a lot about Seth's time in Blacksburg. So lots of good content. We'll have even more this week. For me, it's almost basketball season. So
Yes, sir.
I'll be in Louisville with Andy, obviously, but we're flipping the page essentially.
All right, so I can't wait to talk hoops as well. You know it's a good thing, though. Last year at this time, we were already so onto basketball. You know it's a good thing when you almost forgot that the season opener is on Monday. Of course, David did not, but we were thinking, when are we going to talk about this massive Louisville football game, and we get to talk hoops as well. Well, I think that's going to do it for our show today. Did you have one more thing, Chris?
No, I don't.
All right, sounds beautiful. All right, for Andy Bitter, for Chris Coleman, for David Cunningham, for Key McCrimmon and Nick Brown behind the scenes, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long. We'll see you later on this week to talk some hoops and to preview Louisville. This has been episode 324 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We'll see you next time.